Welcome to Beyond the Frontline podcast, where your host, U.S. Air Force veteran Donna Hoffmeyer, will help you transition from the front line to the home front. Listen every other Wednesday as we'll bring great conversations, resources, tips, and feel-good stories that will resonate and relate. Now, here's your host, Donna Hoffmeyer.
Hey everyone, it's Donna, and today we are going to talk about the concept of the resiliency and multiple identities or multi-identities. Now, we're not talking Sybil, we're not talking multiple personalities that used to be known as, or dissociative identity disorder. That's like the unhealthy side of what we're talking about. So I'm not going to say too much because I'm not the expert in this, but I'm going to introduce our expert. And I'm very, very happy to have, I'm going to say the last name wrong, Scott. Say it for me.
Stolarik.
Stolarik. Yeah, I was like, I'm going to miss a letter out of it. Stolarik, and he is a licensed trauma-informed psychotherapist. He's been practicing in Illinois for 33 years. He has experience as an administrator, as a clinical supervisor, and obviously a very seasoned clinician. And he has his education from University of Notre Dame and Cornell University. And he is currently the owner of Mosaic Pathway Counseling in Gurnee, Illinois. Is that right, Gurnee?
Gurnee, yes, correct.
All right, good, making sure. So welcome. I'm super
Thank you.
excited to have you here. So I'm going to let you kind of take it away and talk about this concept, because you actually named your business Mosaic Pathways. So
Yeah. Well, the idea of the mosaic as I conceptualized it is in the backdrop of working with individuals who were court ordered in the past, individuals who were incarcerated, and all of those individuals having various forms of trauma. So the idea of the mosaic was that trauma, mistakes, things you're not proud of, all of that doesn't represent and define who you are as a person. They are pieces of your puzzle, but certainly not the whole thing. And I've always said, when you're looking at a mosaic work of art, and you're standing an inch or two away from it, you only see a few shards or a few pieces. But if you back up 10 to 12 feet, you see the whole picture. And you see all the other parts that are comprised of the whole, and it defines what you're looking at more clearly. So that's a conceptualization I take to working with trauma, to working with those who are treatment resistant or who are in treatment not voluntarily. And I found that oftentimes there's a common thread of trauma running through those types of situations.
explain to people, because I've heard this term before, and I'm sure other people have too, but sometimes we hear it and we don't really ask why. But explain treatment resistant.
Yeah, treatment resistant, it could be anyone. It's essentially someone who's not believing in or giving into or trusting the process of receiving therapy, and maybe just going to check a box or to satisfy someone or to satisfy a court. So essentially they're just showing up and not really investing what is needed to genuinely embark upon a path of healing. And when I did work with court-ordered clients in particular, there was a tremendous amount of treatment resistance because they just didn't feel they needed to be there. And engaging individuals who have that mindset is very, very challenging and tests your creativity and your patience as a clinician.
Do you take care of veterans, first responders?
I have, yes. More so in my past career, but I still get that today. Police, fire, military. I've done treatment with all of those populations, and a lot of it has been through EMDR.
Did you see, I know you don't have numbers in front of you, so I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but
It's okay.
like
Yeah.
just in the idea of like, do you see that population, the veterans, first responders? Do you see an increase in that treatment resistance for like lack of trust kind of thing? Or are they resistant until they get the feel of it? Or
What I've seen, I've seen a few individuals that are in those categories that have come referred by a higher source, either a higher command or because there's been some kind of an accident on the job. But mostly the resistance that I see with military or paramilitary organization members is a fear of becoming weakened, a fear of, losing that edge or that bravery or that ability to set aside concerns for the sake of the job. I think there's a fear that going into stuff that really provokes a lot of vulnerability will make you weak, will make you vulnerable, no longer have the edge that you need to have in your work. And I'm respectful of that. I don't try to dismiss that notion if somebody brings it to me because frankly I understand it. And we try to work some kind of compromise toward reaching whatever it is their goals are without making them feel like all of their defenses have been shattered and dropped and they remain totally exposed and vulnerable. So I see more of that, the fear of that, than I do anything else.
full resistance? Yeah. So when I was in the military, so I was a nurse in the military, and my last job was actually getting guard and reserve to the office I worked in. Our job was to get guard and reserve to the medical care that they needed, whether that's physical, mental health, whatever it was. And I learned very quickly. So if you imagine, we kind of had control over the situation because if they came into our program, they were there for care, whether
Yes,
it's mental health or physical, right? So if you're not going to do care, then you're not going to be on these orders, right? It was that simple.
right.
That gives you a little bit of power to make things happen, I'll put in quotes, right?
Sure.
But it doesn't mean that it makes it more effective. And I learned that really, really early on. And I'm always been a collaborative kind of person, so I don't think it was that far of a stretch. But there were people that needed the mental health. A lot of reasons why I saw that they were afraid to go there was because of the emotional investment they had to put into it. And
Hmm.
and when you're still in the military and have to make an emotional investment, it's just not this match, right? So I think
Hmm.
so, that's where some of their resistance came to was like, I can't fall apart. That's how we're trained. You can't fall apart. So I could put somebody in the most world-class, top-notch facility
Yep.
that probably cooked them 3 meals a day, gourmet. I mean, that didn't really happen, but I'm just saying I could put them in a
Sure.
really nice facility
Right.
and then come out and I got nothing from it.
Yep.
And then conversely, and I
Right.
think and I'll let you speak to this part. What do you think, like with the families, and what I'm kind of getting at is like the eagerness of the families for the treatment or the partners, the loved ones. Like what I saw was like they're okay, let's get them into care. Like they're
Sure.
so like waiting.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, yes, there's an eagerness and I think they are the ones who see firsthand the impact of what's happening with this individual. So more oftentimes than not, if there's a partner or children and a partner, whatever the case may be, parents, the loved ones connected to the person who needs care are very much cheerleaders for it and recognize the need. So you see that in almost every situation.
Yeah. And what I see too is so they're like, okay, they're in care. And then it's like you can almost feel the breath, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
in my head, I'm like, we're only on round one.
Right.
And I don't say that, but I say it here because this is what we're here to talk about. but I always want to tell people, like, when somebody's starting, it's not linear. It's not a linear lineup. It's very bumpy, right?
Yes.
And it
Yes.
goes back to this, what I saw in the military. What I saw was, and I would suspect, and being a nurse, I guess in that realm also, I can see this being the same. When we only have so much bandwidth, or when they talk about autoimmune, like so many spoons, right? We
Sure.
only have so much. So if you're going to ask me, hey, we're seeing you struggle, we want you to go into therapy, which we all say that's opening cans of worms. We have to decide if we have enough energy for that emotional investment,
Sure.
because
Yep.
it, I've had many veterans, service members tell me, they're like, so when you go in, especially ones that have been through different care, they'll say, you got to be ready to get worse before you get better. In the sense of, like, you're opening up and you're feeling, right? And for
Exactly.
them, feelings don't feel good,
No, no, no. They disarm you, figuratively speaking. And when you need to feel armed, if your job requires you to feel and be armed, you want to be that way. And if a process represents a disarming of defenses, that is unquestionably threatening.
Yeah. 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 It's just, I remember that very distinctly, kind of. Even our commanders would, you'd see them like, okay, they're in treatment. And I could almost just feel them kind of like, okay, they're going to come out and then we're going to go back to work. And I'm like, that's not what's going to happen here. And I used to explain it like building a wooden box, and
Yeah.
when they're inpatient, they're just giving them the tools and they're like, that's a saw, that's a hammer, these are the nails. This is how they're used, right? Like, that's, to me, that's inpatient. And then you go into the next level, PHP, partial hospitalization. That's you now trying to make the box. And the box looks all janky, right? Because you're using those tools
Mm-hmm.
out in society for the first
Mm-hmm.
time. When you come back, like, I didn't work very well. You're like, yeah, but you got to keep practicing this, right? It's going to become
Yes.
smoother, right? And then we give them bigger opportunities in IOP, right? And now you have more, outpatient
Sure.
is shorter in your sessions, but you got more time in that civilian, and they're continuing, like, oh, look, the box now looks like a
Yeah.
box and not
That's right.
some janky thing. And
That's right.
okay. And then, this is what I'd say to the communities, like, then they get into regular treatment, like one time a week, or maybe once every other week, whatever they need.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're learning how to stain the box. They're learning how to
Sure.
put the fine tuning on that box. The box works, it's sealed, things aren't falling out of it. There's no nail scratching you now. Like, they
Mhm.
got how to use it, but
Yeah,
now they're refining their skills.
absolutely. Great way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, I it was actually a CE, a civil engineer commander, that I explained it to that way because of that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he was like, that makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense. And I said, so
Yes.
that doesn't happen in a week of inpatient, a month of inpatient. It doesn't happen that way.
No, no, sure doesn't.
Oh, so we're touching a little bit away from what we were talking about, but I think it's important for people to understand that treatment itself is not, it's not linear, it's not straight up, it's bumpy. And what our veterans and first responders, or anybody that is struggling in treatment, needs is support to try out the tools, maybe not do a great job at it, and be like, okay, we'll try again. And need support to keep trying that and try that new skill, and figure that out.
No
So
doubt. Yes.
yeah, yeah. So what I want to talk about, and it kind of segues nicely into this, is like, we're teaching them how to, get the care, be brave to get in there, to emotionally open up, to feel, and all that. But let's talk about this whole identity thing when they're transitioning, whether it's a police officer, a dispatcher, a EMS, a service member. when they're now moving away from this career field, like
Yep.
they ain't there anymore. So that's a whole other thing. So I'm going to let you kind of talk about this and how this works with resiliency.
Yeah, I think if using the military as an example, if someone is separating from the military and entering into full-time civilian life, and at that window of time are entering therapy and specifically trauma focused therapy, the conversation that we have, as the process is always collaborative, is what is your next step in life? Someone may say, well, I'm leaving the military and I'm entering the police academy, or I'm entering the fire service, which is another organization, similarly structured to as the military, and also the mentality of needing defenses and needing, structure. And so in formulating the treatment plan and putting that into play, I want to know from them what their next step is and collaboratively plan with them their path to healing and walk next to them down this path at the pace through which they want to walk. Because I emphasize to all people who have been through traumatic experiences that maybe they don't view themselves as such, but they are resilient people. They survived what they have been through. And granted, what they have been through has left impressions upon them, most likely negative. There's more strength there than deficiency. And I want them to hear that first and foremost as a basis and a foundation of any future trauma work.
You said something that kind of caught my attention. So we're talking about trauma. What popped in my head with a question for you was, do you think, because I never thought of it this way till just now, do you think some of our struggles, like, let me preface this. A lot of people, not a lot, but many people do. They leave service and then they go into something similar. So the security forces person goes into police work or guard or security or whatever when they come out of the military, firefighter,
Mhm.
translate, nurse,
Mhm.
doctor. So you keep your identity, right? You keep that
Yep.
going, you have value, you have
Mhm.
purpose, all that.
Yep. Yep.
But in there, there's like a whole bunch of trauma. And you said when they get to you, you want to walk beside them and work through all this stuff, work through their identity, trauma. Do you think that veterans, first responders, either of them, do you think that some of their issue with transitioning out is that they're trauma bonded to their former service?
For sure. Not a question. I think trauma bonding, if people have not heard that term before, it's a very real thing. I use an example that's probably more familiar with, the general public is more familiar with it, of domestic violence as more of an example of that. You see a situation where, statistically speaking, a man is hurting a woman in a relationship, and the onlookers to that relationship say, well, why doesn't she leave? It's so obvious. He's such a, this or that. Why doesn't she just dump him and leave? And I think it's because of a trauma bond. And, you know, trauma does have tentacles. It can grab you and hold you in place for a period of time and make leaving much more scary than existing within. And that's a lot of the time what you see in a domestic violence situation. I forget the statistic, but stating that in cases of man to woman abuse, the woman may leave 10 to 12 times before she leaves for good.
The
You
rule of
know,
seven it used to be the rule of seven, but I heard it changed to the rule of 12. It was seven
yeah,
interventions before that person will officially leave.
sure, yeah, and oftentimes before they hit that number, they get killed.
Yeah.
And so, so it's very scary to depart with trauma, because that particular kind of trauma, when you're being victimized by another human, you lose your strength, you lose your dignity, you lose your self-respect. So your capacity to mobilize is very much weakened. In the military, I guess I could parallel that to, let's say, a young man, 18, enters the military right out of high school and becomes a combat soldier and is around that for the next, let's say, 4, 8 years, however many they decide to sign on. They become rather accustomed to things blowing up around them, loud noises, hypervigilance, acting very quickly, being ready to mobilize on a moment's notice. And the prospect of all of a sudden pulling the plug on that, when you've become habituated to that type of lifestyle, is really, really intimidating. And I've heard this many times, that deployed veterans who come home from service can't sleep in a bed. They sleep on the floor. They
Yeah.
they
I've
pref-
heard
they
that.
prefer to sleep on the floor, because a bed is way too soft. It feels like you're falling or gonna fall, and the floor is like the ground, or like a cot. It's firmer, less moving, more stable, certainly less comfortable, but to the to the civilian, it's more comfortable. But to somebody who's used to sleeping on the ground or on a thin sleeping bag, it's what they're used to. And that's why you see this transition at times into organizations that are sort of military adjacent, and it keeps that, you know that attachment, if you will, to the trauma in place, maybe not as regularly, but it's still there. So a trauma bond is very relevant, no question.
It was weird because I was just sitting there and it just popped in my head, trauma bonded to service. And I went, holy shit, that,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
oh yeah,
like we do that, like but it also falls aligned with this identity that we're talking about, right? So so domestic abuse, like that was actually a really good parallel analogy, because I remember distinctly when I was a nurse, I worked labor and delivery for a while, and we had a patient, she's having her second baby. It was documented, the abuse, like it was
mm,
fully documented. And they're having a second baby, he's there. When he would leave, and he, believe it or not, you met him, nicest guy,
you
very
wouldn't know.
calm.
Yeah,
You would not know. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize, like, what you think you see is not what you see. So anyways, anytime he'd leave, I would bring in phone numbers, like on small piece of paper, like, if you decide, you can't force it. If you decide, if this happened, if whatever, here are numbers you can call. Here's a place you can go, whatever that was. And told her, hide it in your diaper bag somewhere or something like
sure,
that. So
absolutely.
yeah, and we knew it. We were taught the rule of seven times, but I swear I heard the other day it like changed to like the like rule of 12 or something. I was
Yeah,
like, oh my God, we're like, we're
yes,
getting
yes,
more stubborn. That's not good. I'd rather
right.
see rule of three, or yeah,
Exactly, exactly.
that's kind of sad, but it's a good parallel relationship. And the difference, like with a domestic abuse versus somebody leaving the military, we say it all the time. You'll hear it all the time. I lost my value. I lost my purpose. I lost my value. I lost my purpose. The abuse person is, they've lost their identity. They're just
Sure.
completely lost. But going back to what we're talking about, I lost my value. I lost my purpose. And I think I told you when we had a pre-meet, I said, I've said this before, that if I went into a room of veterans, I would be able to, with probably, I would say 70% accuracy, maybe even a little more, be able to pick out the people that did not finish their service.
Yeah.
And a lot of people look at me like, how? And I said, because typically, and this is not a dig on people, it's just an observation. I tell it all the time, like, I'm not digging on people, it's an observation, because they are usually the most decorated civilians. They have the hat, the pins, the vest, the shirt. Not, I mean, there's retirees that do that too, but I mean, these guys are just usually higher decorated. They wear it everywhere. They have a license plate, the car, whatever it is, right?
Sure, sure.
And my theory on that is because, and if you talk to them, you will hear a very common thread, more common than not, was they had to leave for some reason that was not their choice. So now we come out and we've got a couple things. One, some of us might have this trauma bond going on. A lot of us might have that going on. And two, we'll just take the person that came out by not their choice. So this person was going to do a full career, and maybe at 8 years ends up in a medical board, and they cut their term short. Thank you for your service, but you're not retainable anymore. Have a good day. And so, boom, what do you see with that person now?
Well, that person in particular is the one I want to emphasize the importance of collaboration with. If that person ends up in a therapeutic setting by their choice or not, whether they're still in the military, whether they're separating or have separated, I want them to feel a sense of control, because largely what's surrounding us in that moment and what is bringing them to see me revolve around issues of not having control and feeling very out of control, mentally speaking. So, and many times I think when someone who's in the military or police or fire or anything, if they meet with somebody that they view to be like medical personnel, even though a therapist is not a medical person, there's this idea that, well, I got to do what they tell me. If they say this is something I got to work on, I guess I've got to look at that. But so instead of going that route, I want to keep the door open for collaboration. I want to be the student, not the teacher in the early going, and help, partner with them to formulate ideas and a treatment plan that they feel is indicated, not anyone else, but they. And I think they then start to feel more in command of things, more in control of their choices, more skin in the game on what happens moving forward versus, a doctor saying, take this every day for a week and make sure there's food in your stomach, or, or keep it elevated for a week. No,
Right.
no physical activity. It, it's more a, what do you think? And I think that's not always, frankly, not always well received, because I've been
At
asked,
all. I
yeah,
mean, I'm laughing if you're saying that. I'm starting to smile because, I mean, for God's sake, Scott, like literally, they send us a note. I mean, an email. Hey, your physical is on this day. Okie doke. Your
yep,
dental appointment. One of my greatest fears coming out of the military was remembering to book my dental appointment.
sure.
I never,
Yeah,
or my
yeah.
eye appointment. That sounds so silly to a civilian. They're like, why wouldn't you do that? And I'm like, because we didn't have to. Show up, need your physical. Deploying, get in line, got to get shots. Boom, boom. So absolutely, when you say, hey, I want to collaborate with you in your
Boom.
care,
Oh, there we go.
when they're saying, I want to collaborate with you in your care, they're like, what are you talking about?
We're stepping away for a quick break to hear from V2M Veteran Magazine. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with the interview.
Looking for stories that truly matter to our military community? Discover V2M, the veteran magazine. Read online at v2mag.com.
Yeah, no, I specifically remember a case of a young man who separated after 4 years. And I went through that little speech of collaboration, and I distinctly remember him asking if he could have permission to speak freely.
Oh,
And, I said, that's the only kind of speaking we do here is freely. And he goes, "Aren't you the expert? Aren't you the one that's supposed to tell me what to do?" And I said, "Well, we could view it that way if you want, but this is why I prefer not to view it that way." And I, broke it down a little bit more, and I could see the understanding, coming to him as we talked about, empowerment and autonomy and decision making and how that's connected to trauma resolution. It really, you know, turned on some light bulbs for him in his mind, and it was a very therapeutic experience actually for both of us, and he ended up doing very well.
I could see that. I mean, that is, I said when somebody said that to me, I just kind of looked at him like, well, no kidding. But yet my brain was like, yeah, no kidding. When are you going to realize it? Like, empower
Right.
yourself. You don't have to deal with that. Like, no,
Right.
goodbye. That's it. And so, yeah, I could see that. I could see people doing that. And honestly, the younger they are, the 4 years younger in rank, I can see that more and more where that and that leads to kind of what we're talking about, this identity wrap up, right?
Yes,
So when they're coming out, whether and I don't think personally that it has anything to do with how long you've served. It has everything to do with how you view your identity.
that's right.
So what do you see when you're working with people with this identity, especially our veterans and first responders, that very much so identify? What do you
Sure.
see? I guess what I'm looking at is like, what do you see for the connection between this multi-identity and this resiliency, this success and transition when people have this multi-identity versus a soul identity?
Yeah, I mean, the 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 first discussion I think is just, because you're not in the environment anymore doesn't mean that it's no longer a part of your value system and your identity, that whatever you learned in the military, you challenge yourself to figure out how that can be translated into civilian life, not necessarily seamlessly, but maybe just cross over well, and to also explore how those skills can be applied to things you never thought you would do, you
Soft
know?
skills. Soft
Yeah,
skills.
yeah, yeah. So you have veterans like yourself who write books and decide, okay, I'm going to venture into this realm now, and the traits that you develop while serving very much aided in the completion of that project. So I think if there's a visibility to the identity not dying but living on and living on in different ways, that's really important buy-in. If there's buy-in into some of your core skills and abilities that existed in one chapter of life, can be translated into doing something maybe you never thought you would do, that you never thought was within the realm of reason. So I think getting buy-in on that versus saying, okay, this part of you is completely dead, it's done, it's over, there's certainly completion to a lot of it and closure needed, but those experiences are still part of you, and they're still, whether they're positive or negative, we can still draw from them and use them to pave the path moving forward. And if I can get buy-in on that, I think the path ahead becomes a little bit easier.
I think of this again, just popped in my head, a museum, right? So I always
Mhm.
say like we should always honor our time. We did something that, 1% of the population is doing. And within the subcultures, that's even fewer doing even more mentally challenging things. Again, whether that's on the first responder side or whether that's on the military side, there's the genre and subgenres, right? There's the collective of that group, and then there's, the SWAT teams, the special forces, the,
Right. Right.
intel, whatever that is. And that comes with added stress. That's just the name of the game. It is what it is, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
but so back to the museum, it's like I think of it like we honor that. And in my head, I think if you can just make that a mental museum that you can go visit and
Absolutely.
explore and have good thoughts of that, be able to look at the rough times and not have a physical response, like
Hmm.
the ultimate is that you could walk through your whole museum and not have a parasympathetic sympathetic response, not have your
Hmm.
heart rate fly up, not have your
Hmm.
teeth clench, not have you close your eyes trying to forget that, but to say, "Ooh, that was a damn rough time, but here I am."
Yeah.
And I'm using my skills for a whole bunch of other stuff, you
Yeah,
know.
that's a fantastic example, and I think it really resonates, the notion of a museum and honoring, which I do use that word a lot. And some people say, well, honor, why would I ever honor this thing that happened to me that was so negative? And by honoring, I mean, well, acknowledging its existence, knowing that it happened, not pretending like it didn't, and drawing any strength that you can from it to legitimately keep it in the past, or as you noted, in the museum, something that if you choose, you can go back and visit. If you don't want to, it's there. You don't have to go. So very much using those experiences to one's benefit. And that doesn't always register. And I can understand why, you know.
Yeah, and I think of like, if you want to take somebody to the museum, right? Continuing with that visual, then that's you sharing, right? You choose to
It
share
is.
that information when someone you can share that info and take somebody to the museum with you so they can observe that and see what you did and they can honor that, and
Yes.
actually it's a fair question. Like somebody like, why would you ever want to honor the shit that I went through? Well, because you went through it and you're still here. And
That's
believe it
right.
or not, you built skill set, you
That's right.
know. And
That's
and
right.
I always want to say to people, it's like you really got to look at what your capabilities are. One of my skill sets is I'm good at translation, not in languages. I wish I was good at that, but in more of like I had to on any given day talk to somebody that's stuck to the Air Force, commander, supervisor, or the service member themselves, right? That
Yes.
that's a lot of different levels to
Yes, it
get
is.
the information across in a way that they're going to understand it. Or
Yes.
the medical personnel themselves, right? The doctor, the nurses, the therapist, the whoever. That is 4 or 5 completely different ways that I talk to people
Yes.
so they understand and we understand each other, right? And we're building trust and all those other things. So I in my civilian life, I'm really good at that because I've had to do it. That's just one of those things I had to figure out.
What an effective skill as well. I mean, to translate something that's very important so in a way that different receivers can hear it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it didn't ever occur to me. Somebody pointed it out to me. That's why I know it. And it just was kind of what I did, right? And where does that translate? Well, heck, I mean, doing a podcast, right? I have to talk to
Yeah.
people in all different kinds of
Sure.
ways,
Sure.
and so talking to a medical person or a therapist, it's a different conversation than when I'm talking to a CEO or
Mm.
that that is just a skill set that translates into things. So that's what I encourage people to do. And is it all, again, it's not linear, it's not a straight line. So I think you and I talked about this because you're the one that said, when you have this mosaic, which means there are a lot of different parts of you,
Yeah,
this is what builds resiliency, right?
sure.
So
Yeah.
you take from these parts, our military time, our first responder time, our time in the hospital, whatever that is, you pull out those skill sets, you pull out the wisdom, right? Because the trauma that happened, the experiences that happened, the whatever. And then you use that for other parts, which I think is really great. Well, what popped in my head, and I said this during the pre-meet, was I lived in England for a while and I lived close to Cambridge. And there they have the mathematical bridge. And the mathematical bridge is held together with no bolts or nuts or anything.
Mm,
It's by its own sheer force. And why is that? If you go look at it, there are a lot of parts on that thing. That is
yeah.
not a bridge that, one, it doesn't go straight across and have boards on it like what you would see as a typical bridge. It's an arch. It's
Oh,
like that
wow.
for a reason. It
Wow.
all the it's bent, right? Because it's more parts of it is making pressure on itself that is
Yes.
holding it up.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing.
So
Amazing.
to me, I like that's just a great visual of what we need to
Yeah.
strive to be
Right.
is this mosaic, this mathematical bridge type thing where all these parts are strengthening
Sure.
ourselves,
No, that's great. That's a great example. And it does do that. They rely on each other. They hold each other together, and the whole picture is, you know, held together on that, that mathematical force there. And it's so true.
Yeah. So when I see, do you, how do you handle when you see people, and of course we're talking about veteran first responders, but I think this will transcend across all populations. But when you see people that have had enough trauma that's not healed and they're isolating,
Yeah.
how do you handle that?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do
Yeah.
you work with these people?
It's that same, it's from that same spirit of collaboration. What I say to people, the same thing I say to someone who's, depressed, for other reasons, non-military folks, is, I understand, why this is happening right now and the purpose that it serves for you. And I get its function. But, in coming to agreement on that, we can also most of the time agree to the fact that it doesn't serve a long-term function. And what we
Exhausting.
want, yeah, and what we want to do is eventually get back out to a place of mobility and a place of integration, but giving permission to what is happening now to happen and understanding it versus what they probably hear from everybody else and their brother is that you got to get out of bed. You got to go outside. You got to stop staying in the house all day. You got to, and that's stated more and more and more. And I think it makes them significantly less motivated to become, you know, activated in their own lives. So I think joining with them to say, I get it. I know why you're isolating, and it makes sense that you're going to choose to do that moving forward. And I know the hurt that you've been through, and I know this keeps you from that. So it does make sense to me. I get it. And, so laying that foundation brings us to a place where we can agree that what they're doing is not a long-term solution. So essentially permission for that short-term kind of intervention And then the prospect of, okay, when this is done, and basically when they decide that it's done, we'll get to that other part we were talking about. And it it it's coming at it from a different angle, saying the same thing maybe about concern, but saying it in a much different way, and
Yeah, like awareness.
not attaching any judgment to it. And that seems to really open a door that isn't opened by other means.
You're giving them control again.
Absolutely. Giving them control, giving them choice. You're not pathologizing. You
Yeah.
know, if somebody's depressed, they can't do what you do. They can't get up. They can't go to work. They can't smile. They can't, be excited about anything. So I think understanding and validating that existence first and foremost is important.
What do
You
you
know,
say to the person that says, well, if you get up and get moving, you won't be depressed. If you get up and get some sunshine, you won't be sad. If you get up and take a shower, you might feel
well,
better.
yeah. I mean, what I would say to them is, the same thing I would say to someone who says, give coffee to someone who's drunk. You know, it's like, okay, well, what you've got now is a wide awake drunk, who's going to keep going and carrying on and stuff. And so somebody who's depressed, you're going to have that depressed person cleaner if they take a shower. You're going to have them squinting more if they're in the sunlight.
Suntanned.
Suntan, sure, sure. And what I would say is I understand the spirit of that feedback because vitamin D, sun exposure with limits is good. Bathing and cleaning and having good hygiene is good. But when you're physically and mentally in a place where you can't mobilize to get it, you just kind of chalk it up to, yeah, tell me something I don't know. Okay, yeah, is the person who's receiving that feedback, that's what they're saying. And if they do any of those things, it's merely to placate. It's not because they want to. It's to get their spouse to be quiet or their mom to stop, you know, harping on them to go outside or their fathers to stop.
I
But
I
when
say, go ahead.
yeah. Well, when they want to do it, it's completely different. When they
Yeah.
themselves want to do it.
I say that it was a little bit of a loaded question because I remember one time, I've said this in a past podcast, that this was, I don't know, probably a year or two ago. And of course, the veteran suicide rate's high, first responders similar. Our numbers are just better because we're centralized
Mhm.
versus, first responders are state.
Sure.
So so I'm sure that if you could pull that all together, that those numbers would be pretty equal.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
suicide rate hasn't gone down. If
No.
anything, it's gone the other way.
Yes.
And so it was Doug Collins? I think it was the VA. So I think it was Doug Collins that said $185 million towards suicide prevention, and we're not any better. And I remember I was sitting there by myself and I just blurted out, I'm like, because it's not a money thing. It's not a money
No.
issue.
No.
And
It's not.
and why I asked you that question was for that specific reason, was like, one, if you've ever dealt with depression, if you've ever had it, you would never make the comment to someone, right?
Right. Right.
I can't say that I have depression, but I did have postpartum blues pretty bad. And all I could think of was like, if this is what depression is, what people deal with, oh my God, like that was enough for me.
Sure. Sure.
So,
Yes.
then you hear these stories of, oh my God, I didn't even know he was sad. Oh my God, I didn't know this. They didn't show any signs. They didn't. Right, because we're really good at masking. People are really good at masking. And
Sure they
like
are.
you just said, it's masking and placating. And I think that is even more accurate than just saying masking because they don't want to hear it. So if you're like, well, if you just took a shower, you'd feel better. And you're like, great. So now I'm wet and depressed. That's super awesome, right? Maybe. And so I want the audience to understand that, like, people are like, well, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, just be present.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
accept them accept them where they're at. And you don't know the effect, how effective that is. And I say this because this happened to me. And it really hit home this idea of what support looks like, because it's not as time consuming, emotionally consuming, or mental consuming as you think it is. So, and I've told this story before. My best friend let me tell the story. She had to get out of a really traumatic situation. And so she moved from the East Coast to where we are to get out of there. It was very, very like life-threatening kind of thing. And ended up living in here in Texas for 5 years. And then her parents started to get poor health. She's like, I'm going to move back to the East Coast. And I said, okay. And one day, and she was up in Austin, I'm here in San Antonio. She sends me a text, an image, and the image is a suicide note. That's not what you want to get from your best friend,
Oh
right?
Lord, yeah.
And I'm looking at this, and she said, Donna, I wrote this like, I think it was the first year she was there, maybe the second year, somewhere in there. I think it was her first year. She goes, I wrote this, and I need to say thank you because you kept me going.
Mm.
Now, I did not do anything great. Trust me. I don't wear a cape. I'm not running around doing the Superman pose. That was my best friend. So when she's having a rough day and we're talking, I'm like, that sucks. I said, but I'm here if you need anything. Or if I could do something like, hey, you want to go to lunch? Or,
Sure, sure.
hey, I'm going to come up and see you. Or, me and my daughter went up or whatever that is.
Yep.
We kept in touch regularly, and I had no idea. And I'm telling you, her and I have been we've been friends since we've been 5. So this is
Wow.
not like this is a long, long friendship. And I didn't and now did I know she was struggling? Yes. And she was in therapy, and I had helped her get, a couple of things in order for her. There was financial struggles. There was a lot of those struggles. Yes, I knew that. I didn't know how close she was. I didn't know
Wow.
she was so close that she wrote a note
Wow.
that close, right? So
Powerful. Powerful.
yeah, yeah. So I say to people like, your presence is important, but you got to understand, like, your presence isn't like like a puppy dog in your face, like, not
Right.
that.
Sure, sure.
Just meeting them where they're at. And I told you, we do have veterans and first responders, and I currently work with a couple right now that they do struggle with giving out in the community, and they do isolate, and I always put the invite like, hey, are you coming? Or, hey, I'm sorry you missed that, whatever was going on. Okay, next time, and
Mhm.
sometimes I just, they say why they couldn't, and I just put a heart, and I'm like, next time, and that's all I'll say, because
Yep.
what else do you say? Like, I'm not chiding you, is not going to change anything. Is it
No.
frustrating to me? Yes, it's frustrating. I'd be an absolute liar not to say it wasn't frustrating, but it's frustrating only because I know that people are there for them and that they can do this. And there is a whole community that wants to reach out to them. But I
Sure.
also know
Sure.
that just that community sometimes, any community, when you've been in isolation, can just be too much. I mean, I had one that walked in the door at a breakfast that we have, and we just had an unexpected number of people show up, which was great. And she walked in, and I heard her go, oh no. And she like turned around and she goes, I can't do this. I said, hey, you showed up. And maybe
You
next
showed up.
time you show up and you sit for 5 minutes and then you go, right?
Absolutely.
Good job. So, I followed up. That
Absolutely.
was a conversation we had after, and I said,
Yes.
proud of you. And the comment she made, thank you for not forgetting about me. Thank
Mhm.
you for and that says a lot
Yeah.
to me. And I tell people, like,
Absolutely.
you're going to ask them 150 times
Yeah.
or 200 times, and it might be the 151st or the 201st time that they actually come. It's not that they don't want to. They probably want to more than anything. They
Yeah.
just can't, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
so tying it back to the resiliency part, do you see when you are working with this population, as you're collaborating with them and empowering them, when they take the first step, what do you see? Like they take that first empowered step, whatever that may look like, maybe trying something new or
Sure.
whatever. How do you see the path goes when they get a taste of the empowerment?
Well, they're eager to share it, they're eager to report it. They're energized. There's a realization that it can work, it is possible, and there's a lot more motivation and excitement to take the next one. And so, it's getting over that first hurdle oftentimes, but when they do, your hope is that it catches fire and really takes off. And I see that a lot when they're actually able to do it, you know.
What's your best
Uh,
success story? Like or the one that brings you the most joy? I mean, success is definitely a subjective word.
oh wow. I can give an example. Maybe recency is always easiest for me. I
Yeah,
trying to go
any of
back
them.
in my memory banks is always hard. But today, for example, I received a message from a client who told me that she finally retained a divorce attorney and is moving forward with divorcing her spouse who she had moved away from over a year ago, and because of his abusiveness was very fearful of going further with this, and everybody in her life was saying, you got to get this going, you got to get closure on this, you got to. And I really didn't touch it with her, but just explored more of the emotions around it and her journey and the struggles and validated those. And got a message today that, hey, I retained the attorney, the process is in works. And I gave her a very affirming message back, and she was
Yeah,
very proud of herself. And so, but this was a long process. I mean, this was a 20 plus year marriage, trying to move out, and basically did it sort of under the cover of, darkness, so to
yeah,
speak. And now it's like, okay, I'm going to make this official after like a year and a half. And there was just an eagerness to report it. There was a pride in oneself, and there's, I think, going to be a lot of empowerment that comes from that because they had control. I
yeah,
mean, this was a relationship that was extraordinarily controlling and, just demoralizing, and never could do anything right kind of feeling. So this was big. I mean, it was
huge.
big to leave. It was really big to leave. But now, she's not allowed back in her house, not allowed back in her house to get other things. But, now it's going to be a different story. So,
Yeah, she's free.
yeah, so it's a big, big, stand up moment for this person. And when those happen, they're beautiful.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a really good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. And that just happened today. So,
See, everything happens for a reason. That's
yeah.
funny.
Yeah. Mm.
All right. Any last words? We'll wrap this up. Any last words on this multi-identity resiliency, the importance of it?
Yeah, I think, my message is pretty consistent in that I say to people who are listening or who are open to listening that bad things that you've done, things you're not proud of, or bad things that have happened to you, those are not singularly defining of who you are. And they're shards in that larger mosaic. And whether or not you choose to see the other pieces is completely your empowered choice to make. But hopefully, when you decide to back up and look at it, you know they'll be there because they are.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I just want to add to that, like the more you relate to all parts of you, I think easier it is to probably love yourself wholly
Oh,
and be
sure.
more
Oh, sure.
resilient. You know what I mean? And so, for the audience, we talked about this identity, multi-identities, and resiliency, along with some of the things that impact this, through our time. So different traumas, military, first responders, we all have trauma. Why do we all have trauma? Because if we weren't put in high pressure situations, during training, we wouldn't be able to do this in our
That's right.
real
That's
jobs,
right.
right? So we
Right.
all have to endure some level of that. But we need to honor our times, whether it was military service, first responder, nurse, a doctor, dispatcher, whatever that is, and honor that time and, make your museum, go visit it, but you can't retain that whole soul identity
Right.
and think that you're going to be able to move into another area of your life and be able to make that transition. You can't when you're holding on to it. So I encourage everybody to, get brave, try things, empower yourself, and, build your mathematical bridge or your mosaic, however you want to look
Yes.
at that,
Yeah.
but the more you do that, the more resilient you're going to become because you're empowered. So
Absolutely.
everybody, that's just food for thought for the week, right? So, all
Absolutely.
right. I think we're going to wind it down, Scott. I truly appreciate talking to you.
Oh,
This is a really good conversation.
I do as well, Donna. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. So, from all of us here Beyond the Front Line and our parent podcast, Coming Home Well, we greatly appreciate you guys. If you could do us a favor, and I know you hear this on every single podcast, independent news, whatever they're doing it, but it really does matter to us, is if you can share this. None of us get paid for this. This is volunteer. But what's important to us is that it is getting spread out there. So if it resonated with you or you were listening to it and you thought of a friend, send it to them. Like, share, comment. We want your thoughts. We want your comments. If you want to email us at cominghomewell.com. The messages will get directly to me. I promise you that. So from all of us here to all of you, we hope you have an amazing week.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Front Line, a podcast of Coming Home Well. Join us every other Wednesday. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. Thanks again. And until all are home and all are well.